Hey guys, I'm recording this on a beautiful, gloomy, rainy day. You know, every time I see rainy days, I'm like, I hate this. Seasonal depression is coming in. I hate rain. But then I remember that the rain brings out the worms, and that's God's way of feeding the birds. And I remember about the verse where God says that the birds don't worry or store up food in barns for themselves, but they just trust in the natural selection of God that He will feed them. And so every time it rains and I see myself thinking negatively about it, it just reminds me, like, right now God is feeding the birds, and they knew this time was coming, so they didn't worry and they did not toil. But sometimes we worry and sometimes we toil about things that are out of our control, and sometimes we set standards for ourselves, and sometimes we set goals for ourselves that we're not able to reach. And what happens when we're not able to reach those goals? We begin to get very hard on ourselves. And today I had, a community counselor, like a mentor within my school. I had her write a reference letter for me today, and she called me down to confirm the reference letter to see if it was still good. And so I came down and I read it, and there was a section of it where she had to talk about my weaknesses, and the only weakness she put down for me was that I can be very hard on myself sometimes. And I asked her about it, and I was like, what do you mean by I can be hard on myself sometimes? And she's like, there's no particular situation where I've seen you beat yourself up for something, but I can just look at your face when something doesn't go your way, or when something doesn't go planned, or when something's that you planned so detailed, it's out of your control and something messes up. I can see the way that you react to it. And it's like, she's a social worker, so she's been doing this for 30 years. She can read body language and stuff. So she was just basically telling me that she could tell that internally I'm mad at myself and nobody else, even when things aren't my fault. And so she was like, the way that you stop being mad at yourself or stop being so hard on yourself is you have to practice it. You have to practice healthy self-dialogue. You have to practice telling yourself, not every day is going to be the best day, or not everything is going to turn out exactly how I want it to be. And, but I'm still taking those steps, and I'm still working towards being that better version of myself. And so she was just telling me that internal dialogue, changing the way you speak to yourself, is the best way to stop being so hard on yourself. And then I looked at the verse of the day today, and the verse of the day was, be merciful just as your God is merciful. And so I was watching the video on YouVersion, and the guy that was talking was telling the audience about how we need to find somebody today in our lives and take a moment aside and take some time in our quiet time with God and pray for that person, and pray that our heart changes towards that person and that we could be more merciful to that person. And I remember thinking about all the people who I potentially am not as merciful to, and then God just told me, you're not merciful towards you at all. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And he's like, well, when the guy said pick somebody who you need to be more merciful towards, are you forgetting that you're a human being just like everybody else? Are you forgetting that you were made in my image just like everybody else? And even when I was talking to the social worker, she was telling me about how the reason why, where this being hard on yourself comes from, there's always a root and then an underlying cause. And so she said the underlying cause was perfectionism. I have this strive to always be perfect. And then the root of that is I grew up in a household where I was only celebrated when I was the obedient golden child. And I already knew this. I do deep work, shadow work all the time. And so she was basically just telling me, now you know the root, now you know where that comes from. You have to work on dismantling that, right? And so I learned through talking to her that I also hold unfair expectations for other people. Sometimes I see other people, and that's what the verse was talking about today. It was talking about being merciful toward other people. And when you're not merciful towards yourself, how can you show mercy towards other people? If you beat yourself up for every mistake you make, if one person, one friend, one family member, one guy, one girl makes a mistake, you're quick to cut them off. And that's the way that I am. So I'm not even directing this towards anybody in particular. I'm this way. I I'm very strict with myself and making mistakes, and it's almost like I operate like a robot. Like I don't allow myself to slip up. And so when I have a friend that comes in my life and they do something wrong because they're a human being and they're flawed, and it happens, and conflict is what makes a friendship a friendship. Like that's literally what a friendship is. The best friendships are based off on healthy conflict. And so when a friend does something like that I don't like, I cut them off so quick. I don't even think twice. I cut them off immediately, right? And so the social worker was telling me, like, that's not mercy. Like, that's not mercy. Mercy is showing compassionate and forgiving, loving kindness towards people when they've wronged you. Mercy is, you don't deserve it. You don't deserve mercy. Not everybody deserves mercy, but God is merciful. And if we're made in his image, we also too have to be merciful. But I guess the basis of what I'm trying to say today is you cannot be something for somebody that you aren't for yourself. And you cannot show somebody mercy, and you cannot show somebody grace, and you cannot show somebody forgiveness if you haven't practiced showing yourself that. And this isn't a race, and this has to get done right now. We're going back into the perfect mindset, the fixer mindset. We're not perfect, and we're not fixers, and we're not God. We have this journey that we go through called life, and every stage of life we're going to learn something new about ourselves. And so today, what did you learn? You learned that in order to be merciful towards other people, like God is merciful towards other people, it needs to start from within. So you need to be merciful to yourself. So the best way that I can encourage you to enact that is you make a mistake, you don't beat yourself up and be like, I'm so stupid, I'm so dumb. You say, it was a mistake, it happens, we move on. That's the biggest advice that I can give you. You just need to learn to forgive yourself and move on. I always say, if you need it, take 3 days and grieve. If you need to take 3 days and rest, get back to yourself, get back to your soul, and then you forgive and you move on. Why? Because as you're sitting in bed rotting and hating yourself for a simple mistake, the rest of the world is still going on. The clock is still ticking. Life is still moving on without you. So you can either stay stuck and the time will still move, or you can move on and improve and the time is still going to move.